With my 35 years of experience, our team at US Asset Management can deliver professional investment management, financial planning to help you target your goals, and even specialized divorce financial analysis if you need it. We are here to help you make better decisions with your money. Call US Asset Management today and let's get to work in your financial future.
The left is siding with illegals, attacking ICE, and fighting to let non-citizens vote. Republican Kelvin King is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, Air Force veteran, and conservative businessman. As Georgia's Secretary of State, Kelvin will put Americans first, root out corruption, clean up voter rolls, and restore confidence in our elections. The other candidates had their chance and failed. Republican Kelvin King for Secretary of State, leadership Georgia voters can trust.
Pro-Trump warrior Steve Gooch won't just cut property taxes in Georgia. He'll throw them straight in the wood chipper.
Senior citizens on fixed income shouldn't be forced from their homes. Neither should veterans who have served our country and fought for our freedoms. And neither should anyone else for that matter. Frankly, these crazy property taxes are un-American. I'll tear them to shreds. We'll make home ownership great again.
Steve Gooch for Lieutenant Governor. Toughest tax cutter Georgia's ever seen.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with US Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call US Asset Management today and put us to work for you.
What happens in Georgia gets revealed one by one as the facts are unsealed. From the pit comes what they don't want you to see. When the daily nugget of truth is dropped with your host, BKP.
Hey folks, how are you today? I'm your host, BKP, and you're watching BKP Politics on voiceofruralamerica.com. We're back. Yes, we're back. And another segment here. And we're back. I'm your host, BKP, and you're watching BKP Politics on voiceofruralamerica.com. So, you know, we have the governor's race here in Georgia. And, you know, we have tied a string. The Republican side, we've tied a string around this whole thing, and we've been pulling it until we can pull it tight and complete what we want to present to you. And that is that the Rick Jackson campaign, let me come right out of the box. Rick Jackson is running to beat Donald Trump. And I will explain that. So we're going to talk about today the Republican ruling class of Georgia. Yes, we have the Republican ruling class. We have the Georgia Republican royalty. Yes, we do. We have royalty. You know, you can see everybody line up when the royalty shows up at the one of the events, right? We have the Republican royalty that we're going to talk about, and then we have the incestuous, right? Incestuous Republican circle. So there's three things I want to really wrap up today with Donald Trump: Republican ruling class, the Georgia Republican royalty, and the incestuous Republican circle, and how they almost, well, I'll explain in just a minute. Now, we have Rick Jackson. Rick is running for Mr. Jackson. We'll call him Mr. Jackson. Rick Jackson, the CEO or chairman of Jackson Healthcare out of Cumming, Georgia, Alpharetta, Georgia. He is running to be the governor of Georgia. And we remember we started out, as we've said multiple times, we can't figure out why. I can't get the why Rick Jackson is running. So we have done it piece by piece and worked on it all the way around. And we get where we really want to be today. And today we're not attacking anyone. We're not going after anyone. We're just going to be very clear on what's going on right now with Rick Jackson, how it's a full circle, and we're going to bring it all the way around. And you have to tell the whole story or it cannot be told. Period. You have to tell the whole story. Now, Rick Jackson is running for governor, but and he has made several campaign promises, and we have told you over and over, we don't quite understand why he would want to leave this 47,000 square foot mansion in Cumming, Georgia, and why he would want to leave this palatial office in Alpharetta, where I think it's like $110 or $20 million office complex. It's enormous, and he has a big corner office there. We have said over and over, why would he want that? Well, we're going to explain why. Does he really want it? Does it matter if he loses? I mean, if Burt Jones is not the nominee for the Republican Party, does that equal a win for Rick Jackson? If a Democrat wins the governor's office, does that equal a win for Rick Jackson? If Rick Jackson just does not win at all, as long as Burt Jones is not the next governor of Georgia, does that equal the win Rick Jackson is looking for? And is Rick Jackson trying to accomplish this win for himself and for the people he continues to make these campaign promises for, like lowering your taxes and, capping property tax and state income tax and crime and illegals and deporting, and or is the real win for Rick Jackson the fact that Georgia no longer will have to deal with Donald Trump? When I say my opinion, as you well know, I'm going to tell you, if you're voting for Rick Jackson, you're voting against Donald Trump. If you're voting for Rick Jackson, you're no longer supporting Donald Trump. And I'm serious. When I get done today, you really can't say I voted for Rick Jackson, but I still support Donald Trump, because I'm going to show you why that can't go together. Now, keep this in mind. Burt Jones is endorsed by Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has a couple more endorsements in the state. All right? He has a couple more endorsements in the state. He's got Jim Kingston. Looks to be a slam dunk. Let's not count that. But in the 1st Congressional District. And he has congressman. He has an endorsement in the congressional race in the 10th District, where he's endorsed Houston Gaines. Look like pretty solid wins right now, but we'll find out on May 19th, Election Day, or after a runoff. But that being said, the real endorsement that's left in Georgia, you realize there's just one. And we're going to go through how many endorsements Trump has made in Georgia and some of the history. This is it. This is the last one. This is the big one. This is for governor. Now, Burt Jones, who are they stopping from getting in the governor's office in Georgia? You see, there's two reasons. There's A, the Senate race against John Ossoff. There's no Trump-endorsed candidate. Right? And B, there's Rick Jackson running against Burt Jones. And if they could stop Burt Jones, they could stop the likeness of Donald Trump completely once and for all. Now, last year, I went into it last year. I mean, before I stopped my daily broadcast when I was doing the Georgia Hour and we switched to our format now, I told you I was watching the demagnification of Georgia. And Derek Dooley being picked by Brian Kemp. We're going to get into that today. But how many of you are getting mailers with Trump's likeness, right? Whether it's your state representative, whether it's your state senator, a candidate for state senate, a candidate for county commissioner, a candidate for state representative, a candidate for secretary of state, whatever it may be. How many of you are getting flooded with mailers every single day with President Trump's likeness on the mailer, and when you get it, you look at it and you say, they don't support President Trump. They're never Trumpers. They don't support President Trump. How many of you are getting those? Because the mailbox is full. Because right now, Trump is very popular in Georgia. And in the Republican Party in Georgia, Trump is still very popular. So they're using his likeness, and you know they don't like Donald Trump. Now, as soon as let's get into this, and let me explain one thing before we go too far. The figurative meaning, I told you, the incestuous Republican circle. In a professional or social context, incestuous describes a group, industry, or community that is excessively close, exclusive, and resistant to outside influence. Right? When a group is described this way, it means the people within are consistently interact with, hire, promote, or cover for one another, right? That's what we got. This usually implies a negative situation where there is a lack of fresh ideas, objective oversight, or fairness to outsiders. So that's why I say we're going to deal with the incestuous Republican circle in Georgia today. The entire thing. Now, so the primary is May 19th. The runoff is Tuesday, June 16th. And last week we showed you that you see every Rick Jackson political investment made in 2016, Rick Jackson made a political investment with none other than Jeb Bush, right, $550,000 or something to a political PAC supporting Jeb Bush. Rick Jackson made a major investment in Jeb Bush. Donald Trump ended that, right? Second, we've talked about Jeff Duncan. Jeff Duncan, former state representative in Georgia, former lieutenant governor, only ran and won and served one term, right? Was supposed to serve 2 terms and then run for governor, but major investment from Melody and Rick Jackson, Melody Jackson, Rick Jackson's wife, and Donald Trump ended that investment that the Jacksons put in one of their political friends. And then last but not least, Nikki Haley in 2024. So Rick Jackson has put an end to all. Donald Trump, I apologize, back up. Donald Trump has put an end to all of Rick Jackson's investments. So Rick Jackson is going to participate with others in trying to finish Donald Trump off in Georgia. You realize if Burt Jones would win the nomination, and if Burt Jones would become the next governor of Georgia, Donald Trump will have the red carpet and he will be welcome in the state of Georgia, right? Well, what if Burt Jones wins and Donald Trump gets invited to the Gold Dome, the governor's office, right? What if right here, when Burt Jones is sworn in, Donald Trump attends? Not on their watch. No, not on their watch, because you got to pay attention to this. Rick Jackson, what he's doing is he's participating. Because at no time, we'll show you the complete, at no time has Rick Jackson, his wife that we can see, and Shane Jackson, his son, a major Nikki Haley supporter, at no point are they really interested, or do they show any care for Donald Trump. Now, if there's a runoff in the elections, it would be Tuesday, June 16th. Now think of Tuesday, June 16th, 2026, and put that in your mind before we go any further. Because if Rick Jackson wins the primary to go on to run in the November general election, behind the scenes somewhere in private, they will be a big group that will have a major party that they never have to put Trump's picture on one of their campaign brochures. They never have to pretend they like Trump any longer. Bottom line, they're finished. And Jackson's their man. And I keep talking in a plural because I'm going to show you. Jackson is their man. What's 50 million? What's 100 million to Rick Jackson? It can be recouped. We'll just say. All right, moving right along. Now, we have to start here. Remember, Donald Trump praises Georgia governor during visit to hurricane damage in East Georgia. So, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, and Brian Kemp in Evans, Georgia, when was it? Around October 2024, they got together, right? Shook hands and made a deal. We've talked about that quite often, All right. So here you go. Now this was after, we'll go back to the rally where Trump and Kemp had a falling out. Trump and Georgia governor use hurricane recovery to make first 2024 appearance together. All right. And they made a deal. I've always told you about this handshake. President Trump and Brian Kemp in the handshake. Right there. But then what does Brian Kemp go and do? He goes and picks Derek Dooley all by himself. So, President Trump wins the election. Brian Kemp and Donald Trump have an agreement, right? That they would, and we got to start here for a reason, because at the top of our ticket for the Republican side we've got to go up against Jon Ossoff. And Jon Ossoff has raised more money than anyone. He's raised more money than any other Senate candidate out there. Our candidates on the Republican primary side haven't even come anywhere close. Nowhere close to compete with him money-wise. So at the top of the ticket, we need a good, solid candidate. So the Republicans need to be unified together. So we have the Trump base, we have the middle that could go either way, and then we have the people that don't like Trump at all, but that will vote for Trump or did vote for Trump. But they don't like Trump. Bottom line. It's the way it is in Georgia. I've always told you there's about 3 lanes. Now, so what we need at the very top of the ticket is we don't need a battle royale. We don't need a Senate battle. We need one candidate going for the primary in the Senate on the Republican side, unified. Now, I'm not saying it's not okay that we have several other Senate candidates to go up against Ossoff, but we have a battle. Now, President Trump and Brian Kemp made a deal. All right? And I'm going to tell you, what I'm telling you is exactly true. You may disagree. You may have people push back. As I say, the uglies come out. There was a truce, all right? And the goal. There was a goal. After Trump and Kemp famously buried the hatchet in the final stretch of the 2024 campaign to secure Georgia, a lot of pressure was put on Kemp to run for Senate. Remember? After Ossoff himself, Trump and national Republicans viewed Kemp as the absolute best to flip the seat. So a lot of people talked that maybe Brian Kemp should run for Senate. That would be the top of the ticket. When Kemp ultimately declined to run in mid-2025, reports surfaced that he told Trump's camp he would work alongside the president to coalesce around a unified consensus candidate. The goal was to avoid a bloody, expensive MAGA versus establishment primary that had cost Republican key Senate seats in the past. So, Kemp tells he's not going to run for Senate. And he says, hey, you know what? I'm going to tell the Trump team, don't worry, tell President Trump, we're going to find a consensus candidate. Put my name on it and put Trump's name on it. Well, there you go. Bottom line. Regardless if it cost Republicans, regardless if it cost you and I in Georgia, a Republican senator, there was no way under the sun that the Kemp family was going to come together and support a candidate that had Donald Trump's name on it. Not going to happen. I'm just telling you, not going to happen. So the truce that they made, you see, we would have all the money in the bank stacking it up to run against Ossoff. We challenge Ossoff with a unified candidate. that has a Trump endorsement and a Kemp endorsement, right? We're going down that lane. We don't have Buddy Carter. We don't have Mike Collins. We don't have Derek Dooley. We don't have any battles in the Senate side. But, yes, we do. Because although Kemp made a deal, he went back on it. That's right. Now, the deal fractured over Derek Dooley. We all know this. Despite the rumored commitment to find a candidate together, Kemp preempted the process. He threw his full political weight behind an unexpected outside candidate, former University of Tennessee football coach Derek Dooley. The unilateral move by Kemp reportedly perturbed Trump and his White House team. Dooley had zero political experience and was not the candidate Trump's orbit was looking at. So Trump's political team, right, his political team, and Trump himself said this wasn't the deal. This was not the deal. We had a truce, right? And so while there was widespread expectation that the two would team up to crown a single Senate nominee, Kemp's solo backing of Dooley effectively split the Georgia GOP's power centers once again. See that? It split once again because when they shook hands in October of 2024, they made a truce. All right? Let's get a Republican senator back. Let's not have a battle in Georgia. You put your name on it. Bring me a candidate. I'll put my name on it. Let's go up against Ossoff. Let's win as Republicans. But you see, Donald Trump has never felt in any way whatsoever a return of the favor. A return, an appreciation for what he did. Right? Now, regardless of what you think, if you're a Trump supporter, a Kemp supporter, or a both, you support both. Kemp would not have gotten the nomination, probably would not have won, not 100%, against Casey Cagle if Trump wouldn't have stepped out and listened to David and Sonny Perdue and endorsed Brian Kemp. And from that time, Donald Trump has never felt that Brian Kemp, Marty Kemp, or the family has ever shown the appreciation. And I'll get into that. So we're starting here. We're going to work backwards a little bit because this is where we're at right now. While the overarching narrative of severe friction between Brian Kemp, Derek Dooley, and Donald Trump at the White House is absolutely true, right? There's nothing publicly out there that shows what exactly happened between all the parties. However, the rumor that I'm referring to in politics likely stems from the very real high publicized behind-the-scenes fallout that occurred between Kemp's team and the White House regarding Dooley's candidacy. So there was a major fallout between Kemp's team and President Trump's team at the White House over Kemp going rogue, picking Derek Dooley, going alone without President Trump. There was a major fallout. Now, as we continue here, Trump has never felt the respect from anyone in the Republican ruling class in Georgia, the Georgia Republican royalty, or the incestuous Republican circle. And I'm going to show you this even further. Now, the conflict instead of coming to a joint agreement, Kemp blindsided the White House by unilaterally endorsing Dooley, a former college coach with zero political experience, who notably admitted he didn't even vote for Trump in 2016 or 2020. All right? This really perturbed the White House. Now, not only, it's almost like Brian Kemp said, okay, Derek Dooley, so you're telling us you didn't vote for Trump in 2016 or 2020? Yes. There you go. That's what we like about you. Right? So the truce, remember that. I've always told you that. The handshake in Evans in October of 2024, right before the election. Brian Kemp and Donald Trump had an agreement. They would both put their name on a Senate candidate at the top to try to save the money, save a big primary battle, right? And now what we have is a Senate candidate, Derek Dooley, that is in third place, and I mean a distant third place, with Brian Kemp's endorsement as the Senate candidate, and we have no Trump-endorsed candidate in the race. But starting right there at Senate, right, there was no way that Brian Kemp was going to put his name on a candidate with Donald Trump. So, let's keep going here. Now, let's remember back in 2018, right? President Trump doesn't feel he's ever been shown the appreciation. Now, November 4th, 2018, right? They're backstage before a huge rally. This is only a couple days before the election. Brian Kemp, Marty Kemp, David Perdue, and David Perdue's wife with President Trump getting ready to go on stage. Up against, right, Stacey Abrams. Now keep in mind, this rally, I think in Macon, just a couple days before this election in 2018, where 50-some thousand, I think, attended, Brian Kemp only won this election against Stacey Abrams by no more than 50,000 votes. Now, this is a general election. Now, Donald Trump did not have any interest in getting involved in the Georgia race. David Perdue and Sonny Perdue went to him and said, please endorse Brian Kemp. Now, here is the rally. This is Brian Kemp coming out. What a crowd to welcome President real Donald Trump in Georgia. Right? November 4th, 2018. Now, Trump is okay at this time, right? This is where Trump is fine. Still feeling energy from last night's rally with President. November 5th, 2018. Here's Brian Kemp, Marty Kemp, and the girls. Brian, Marty, and the girls on stage at that Trump rally with President Donald Trump pulling him over the finish line to beat Stacey Abrams. Get out the vote. Now, I agree with President Trump. I believe President Trump pulled Brian Kemp right through that election, and Brian Kemp became governor of Georgia with the help of Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump does not do what he did in 2018 for the Kemp family, Brian Kemp's not the most powerful governor in the United States, because Georgia's the most powerful governor's office. He's never felt. Now, I'm going to bring this all the way around for you, right? Now, here's July 18th. Keep this in mind. July 18th, 2018. Brian Kemp's running against then Lieutenant Governor. Brian Kemp's the Secretary of State. He's running against then Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, right? And in the primary, Donald Trump gets involved for Brian Kemp. On July 18, 2018, this tweet goes out from Donald Trump and completely, basically ends the Casey Cagle campaign. Ends it. Brian Kemp is running for governor of the great state of Georgia. The primary is Tuesday. Brian is tough on crime, strong on the border, and illegal immigration. He loves our military. He loves our vets, protects our Second Amendment. I give him my full and total endorsement. This is the primary of 2018. Now, here is the GOP at that time in 2018. Brian Kemp is an incredible fighter and tireless champion for the people. Vote Brian Kemp. This is the GOP where President Trump is here doing a rally. So, now, we just talked about 2018. Brian Kemp becomes governor. Now, the very first thing that happens, right, is when Johnny Isaacson retires as Senate, President Trump, we're not going to spend a lot of time, but we do want it on the record. President Trump asks Governor Kemp nicely, could you please appoint Doug Collins to be the next senator, right? When Johnny Isaacson retired as senator, President Trump asked Brian Kemp, could you please appoint Doug Collins to be the next senator, to fill the term for Johnny Isaacson? And Governor Kemp basically ignored that. And I think that might be the first major move that Trump basically said, wait a minute. Come on now. You know, show some appreciation. I helped get you in office. But it feels like Brian Kemp, Marty, and Brian Kemp's family ended that appreciation after the 2018 election. Now, here we go. Remember this right here. Let's go back to Rick Jackson now. Rick Jackson's running for office. Here you go. You have Rick Jackson gave Jeb Bush $550,000, right? And then you have Melody Moore Jackson. She helped invest in their fair-haired young man there, Jeff Duncan, who is now running as a Democrat, right? And here's a couple payments to Jeff Duncan from Melody Jackson. $3,900, $2,500, $6,600, right? And let's stop here for a minute with Shane Jackson. This all comes together, folks. Everything we're doing here comes together. Every bit of it. It's incestuous. All right. And the main goal is to end Donald Trump. Burt Jones is endorsed by Donald Trump. They have to get rid of Donald Trump in the state and be through with him once and for all. and Rick Jackson is helping complete that. Now, so we know Rick Jackson's investments into Jeb Bush, Jeff Duncan, and Nikki Haley all failed at the hands of Donald Trump. We know that, right? So here is Shane Jackson. Now, keep this in mind. We've talked about this every day. Rick Jackson is not on the campaign trail with any family. No family whatsoever. I understand he has 3 adult children. Here is Shane. He has 3 adult children. He has his wife is a professor at Georgia Tech. I understand he has grandchildren. 0 family. 0 family. He does not have anyone on the campaign with him because, in my humble opinion, the mission is not, trust me, is not to get elected. The mission is not to achieve anything he's promising. The mission is to end Donald Trump. So here is Shane Jackson. The reason we're going to talk about this, and this is the kickoff. I was there. Shane Jackson introduced his dad. He's not been on the campaign trail, but he is very much involved in the incestuous circle of the Georgia Republicans and the Republican royalty in Georgia, the ruling class. So here he is introducing his dad. Now, when Nikki Haley ran, I'm just going to show you everything here. When Nikki Haley ran in 2024 against Donald Trump, that was backed by Rick Jackson. Yes, there was a small group. Watch, you're going to have to pay attention because some names are going to come back that you're going to hear. Yes, there was a small group of current and former Georgia state lawmakers who publicly endorsed Nikki Haley during the 2024 Republican presidential primary. While the majority of the Georgia Republican establishment largely stayed out of the primary fray or aligned themselves with Donald Trump, Haley did secure the backing of a few notable figures from the state legislature. Pay attention to the names. We're going to come back. State Representative Scott Hilton, right? Scott Hilton, State Representative Scott Hilton. State Representative Deborah Silcox. State Representative Bill Werkheiser. Former State Representative Megan Hansen, Fran Miller, Eric Johnson. Now, so here is Scott Hilton. Pay attention to Scott Hilton. Here is Deborah Silcox. And here is Bill Werkheiser. Okay? Now, what's important about this? Remember, Rick Jackson sued Burt Jones for using the leadership PAC. Rick Jackson never talks about all the money he dumped into the leadership PAC to help these people that were supporting Nikki Haley. Right? You see all the state representatives that are endorsing Rick Jackson? Rick Jackson is a longtime political, he's thoroughly in it. He's been in it a long time. He is not a greenhorn. There's nothing new about this to him. He knows how it works. So he sues Burt Jones for using the political, leadership PAC, but he doesn't talk about how much money he put into the leadership PAC that was put into campaigns of people much like these that were helping his candidate, Rick Jackson's candidate, Nikki Haley. Absolutely. Nothing. You have to understand, everything I do, nothing goes back to any of them showing an ounce of respect, support, care, or effort to get Donald Trump elected president of the United States or keep him out of jail. Nothing, one more time, nothing I tell you with any of these people point to attempting, helping, supporting, caring to keep Donald Trump out of jail or helping him become president of the United States. Nothing. Now, moving right along. State Representative. Now, I wanted to look and see how much of a relationship do these three people have with none other than Brian Kemp or First Lady Marty Kemp. Now, First Lady Marty Kemp has inserted herself into Georgia politics, and we all know that. So nothing we're about to say today is an attack or go after. First Lady Marty Kemp is out there aggressively making comments, campaigning for candidates, and side by side with her husband, not just at a ribbon cutting or two. So I wanted to see what's their relationship, because these people that endorsed and were on the committee for Nikki Haley in 2024 against Donald Trump, they have a real strong relationship with the Kemps. State Representative Scott Hilton arguably has the closest personal and professional ties to Governor Kemp out of the three. So State Representative Scott Hilton has very, very close ties to Governor Kemp. I'm going to give you a reason why, because you're going to see Scott Hilton again, where he is campaigning this morning with someone by the name of Rick Jackson. But he's fighting. He supported Nikki Haley. He has a very close relationship with the Kemps. Former Kemp staffer. He's a former Kemp staffer, Scott Hilton. Before returning to the state legislature in 2023, Hilton actually worked directly for Brian Kemp. He was appointed by the governor to serve as the executive director of the Georgia First Commission, a task force created by Kemp to streamline government and cut red tape for small business. So keep in mind, Scott Hilton over here on Nikki Haley's campaign, right? Leadership, Georgia Leadership Committee for Nikki Haley, very, very close ties to who? Brian and Marty Kemp. He's out campaigning this morning for Rick Jackson. Finally, and financial and vocal support. During Hilton's highly competitive 2022 and 2024 campaigns for House District 48, Governor Kemp formally endorsed him and funneled significant resources from his own leadership PAC to fund voter outreach for Hilton's race. Hilton has frequently praised Kemp's leadership, specifically citing governors handling of COVID-19. Now, same thing with Deborah Silcox. Let's see, is this? Well, that's Scott Hilton's. Okay, I had that up here. Same thing with Deborah Silcox. Deborah Silcox, prominent establishment Republican, representing a swing district in Atlanta suburbs, making Sandy Springs, making her a crucial ally for Kemp's moderate conservative coalition. She has campaign surrogates. Brian and Marty Kemp have personally thrown their weight behind Silcox to protect her vulnerable seat. Now, keep this in mind. For example, both Governor and First Lady attended and spoke at a major campaign event for her in 2024. Just like Scott Hilton, Governor Kemp authorized his leadership committee to heavily fund voter contact campaigns aimed at protecting Silcox's seat in the state house against the Democrat challenger. Now, she is also on the leadership committee for Georgia for Nikki Haley in 2024, right? So again, Rick Jackson dumping money in Kemp's leadership, pack, where Kemp goes out and takes that money and puts into these other people. It's all a vicious circle. And then let's see, and then you have the Nikki Haley connection, all right? Nikki Haley connection, ready? While Rick Jackson is the CEO and his son Shane Jackson, who serves as the president of Jackson Healthcare, was heavily involved in the 2024 primary we just discussed when Nikki Haley unveiled her official Georgia leadership team. Ready? When Nikki Haley revealed her official Georgia leadership team in early 2024, Shane Jackson and State Representative Bill Werkheiser were both on the board together, serving as top surrogates for Haley in the state. So Shane Jackson, remember, the son of Rick Jackson, they invested a lot of money in Nikki Haley to get her elected, but, right, they didn't just invest money. Shane Jackson, he was on the leadership team for Nikki Haley, Rick Jackson's son. Now, it all comes to a circle, and I'm going to show you. Now, the Kemp Leadership PAC ecosystem. Rick and Melanie Jackson, along with Jackson Healthcare and JIG, are among the most prolific mega donors to the establishment wing of the Republican Party. They are massive financial backers of Governor Brian Kemp, because Georgia allows the governor to operate a leadership committee. Now, in the leadership committee, Rick Jackson could dump, and Melanie and Shane could dump all the money they want in that committee for Brian Kemp, and Brian Kemp could turn around and give it out to maybe Scott Hilton, maybe Deborah Silcox, maybe to help Nikki Haley. Can't make this up. Legislative interest. Jackson Healthcare is based in Alpharetta, and which borders the North Fulton suburb districts by lawmakers like Hilton and Silcox. As a massive healthcare staffing and technology company, Jackson Healthcare frequently advocates for state legislation regarding healthcare regulations, tort reform, okay, and business tax credits. Therefore, their lobbyists work very closely with the establishment allies like Werkheiser, Silcox, and Hilton under the Gold Dome. It's so incestuous, the circle. Now, here's the official list: Nikki Haley's Georgia leadership team, which her presidential campaign unveiled February 16, 2024, ahead of the Georgia primary. As you can see, campaign co-chairs. Nikki Haley, ready? Scott Hilton. Now we're going to show you a picture of Scott Hilton out this morning campaigning with Rick Jackson. But then again, he's very close to Brian Kemp. Scott Hilton, Georgia representative, was the campaign co-chair. Rusty Paul, mayor of Sandy Springs, right, who Brian Kemp endorsed when he ran for governor again in Sandy Springs, was endorsed by Brian Kemp. Wow. Deborah Silcox, right, Georgia State Representative. Eric Turnenblatt, former chief of staff for Governor Sonny Perdue. Wow. I'm sorry. Now, state and local officials, Bill Werkheiser, right? Let me see if I have another one here I'm very interested in. Not right now. I want to get to the next sheet because we're going to get to the business, right? This is Nikki Haley's Georgia leadership team. Business, healthcare, and community leaders. Shane Jackson, president of Jackson Healthcare, right at the top of the Nikki Haley, Rick Jackson's son, right at the top of the Nikki Haley, right, leadership committee in Georgia. Now, I was wondering, which I basically already know these answers, if Brian Kemp has ever said anything maybe nice about Nikki Haley. Keep this in mind. Brian Kemp's comments, yes, because you got to understand, everything we're going to tell you is nothing at no time ever points to any of these people wanting to actively show support for President Trump, endorse President Trump, financially back President Trump, help President Trump stay out of jail. The only thing they want is to get rid of President Trump. The whole group. They're all in cahoots together. Now, yes, there's record of Governor Kemp speaking favorably about Nikki Haley during the 2024 presidential primary cycle, though he ultimately stopped short of using a formal endorsement for her or any other candidate during the primary. March 2023, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal discussing the 2024 Republican field, Governor Kemp praised several non-Trump candidates. He specifically highlighted Haley's loyalty and his personal relationship with her. Now, keep in mind, Nikki Haley came and campaigned for Brian Kemp in the 2022 election. We'll get to that in just a minute, right? Campaigned for Brian Kemp in the 2022. Nikki Haley came and campaigned for us. I've known her over the years, so I'm kind of like everybody else. I'm just seeing how things are playing out and keeping an open mind. The 2022 connection, Kemp's positive remarks about Haley, are rooted in her support during the 2022 re-election bid when Donald Trump actively tried to unseat Kemp by endorsing a primary challenger, David Perdue. Haley publicly broke with Trump and traveled to Georgia to campaign along Brian Kemp. Now, as we continue to say, don't forget, none of these people point to anything. Now, Rick Jackson gave Trump a tip like he's a waiter at the restaurant of $1 million in 2025. So, Milwaukee, remember? Wisconsin, the first debate. Trump did not go to the first debate. He did not debate during the primary at all. He didn't have to. But Brian Kemp showed up at that debate in Milwaukee, where Nikki Haley was considered in that group the front runner. Governor Kemp makes surprise visit to Milwaukee for GOP debate, calls Trump a loser, remember? Although he's not running for president in 2024, Brian Kemp was in Milwaukee for the first presidential debate. Kemp appeared during a segment of a Ruthless podcast outside of the forum and continued his verbal attack against the former president. I think the Trump campaign is making a big mistake not being here. They are my loser tonight, Kemp said. He compared Trump's dominant lead to an unnamed Super Bowl featuring the Atlanta Falcons. Now, you remember when the Atlanta Falcons were up by an enormous score, right? Enormous score against the Patriots and lost. Kemp is trying to say at this time he might be up, but remember the Falcons? So you remember what happened, right? You get complacent. You get into prevent defense, he said, of the cautious football strategy. You try to start spinning all the stuff instead of answering tough questions like everybody else behind us is going to do tonight, right? The governor is no fan of Trump, who blamed the governor for the 2020 defeat of President Joe Biden in Georgia and then unsuccessfully tried to oust him from office. If you're as good as you say you are, get your ass on there, answer the questions, fight it out, let's get it done, said Kemp. That's just my opinion. So Kemp went after Trump, actually, to me, in effort to help Nikki Haley. So keep this in mind. Nikki Haley, in the 2024 presidential primary, Rick Jackson, this is his last. Remember, the first one is Jeb Bush. The second one is Jeff Duncan. Now, Nikki Haley, this is his last defeat by Donald Trump, who crushes Rick Jackson, crushes Shane Jackson, crushes the Kemps, right? Scott Hilton, all the ones that are backing Nikki Haley. Are you one of the nearly 78,000 Georgians who cast a ballot for UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in the presidential primary? 78,000 people. I'm pretty sure I can find Shane Jackson, maybe his dad, maybe his stepmom, Melody Jackson, maybe Marty, Scott Hilton, right? The list goes on. They're all in it together to get rid of Trump. Every one of them. So here's Rick Jack. They got to get rid of Trump. If Burt Jones wins this election, folks, if he wins this election, you have to understand, Donald Trump doesn't go away in Georgia. There is, and I'm going to show you the list in a minute, a long list. Here is this morning, fueling up at the Varsity in Gwinnett, right? This is Rick Jackson fueling up at the Varsity in Gwinnett with Scott Hilton, right? Here's Rick Jackson and Scott Hilton this morning campaigning together for Rick Jackson, trying to take out Burt Jones for governor, as Scott Hilton, very close, used to work directly for Brian Kemp, very close with Governor Kemp and Marty Kemp. Also, one of the co-chairs, Scott Hilton, to the Nikki Haley, right? Do you think when Scott Hilton and Shane Jackson were both on the Nikki Haley leadership committee in Georgia for her campaign for president, that Rick Jackson wasn't well aware of Scott Hilton then? This is all true. If you have cast a vote, this is the toughest I have been yet. If you have cast a vote for Rick Jackson, you did not cast a vote against Burt Jones. You cast a vote against Donald Trump. These people are evening the score against Donald Trump. Every single one of these people are getting evening the score and trying to cut Trump off at the knees. They never intended to endorse a Senate candidate with Trump. They never intended to back Burt Jones. They do not want Trump anywhere near that governor's office. In fact, they'd be happy the day President Trump leaves Georgia to never return. Now, let's go here. Almost done. Remember December 5th in 2020. Don't forget this. Let's go back there. Because December 5th in 2020, President Trump looked at Doug Collins out in the audience and said, "Hey, Doug, you want to run for governor in 2 years? You'd be a good-looking governor," to Doug Collins. This is because Brian Kemp would not approve the Georgia State Senate to move forward of trying to investigate the 2020 election. Either would Jeff Duncan, that was then the lieutenant governor. So, remember that? Now, in 2022, it failed. But this is very important. Trump endorsed statewide candidates. He endorsed Herschel Walker. So, what we have now is we have a Kemp-endorsed candidate going up against Jon Ossoff. No Trump endorsement in the race. What we had then in 2022 is we had Herschel Walker, Trump endorsed. Kemp would not endorse him. He went up against Warnock and lost. Governor David Perdue challenged Brian Kemp. Trump endorsed Secretary of State Jody Hice, ran against Brad Raffensperger. Trump endorsed. John Gordon challenged Chris Carr. Chris Carr can't stand Donald Trump. Trump endorsed. Commissioner for Insurance. Now, you want to wonder why. Now, I've showed you how much money Melody Jackson and Rick Jackson have donated to John King. And John King really tried to pull off a nice job, like he really supported Donald Trump. But don't forget, right? Patrick Witt was a Trump-endorsed candidate who challenged John King for insurance commissioner. Now, out of this list in 2022, right, normally these candidates wouldn't have had to run against anyone. But don't forget, Lieutenant Governor in 2022, Trump endorsed Burt Jones. Burt Jones became the Lieutenant Governor. Now, they feel, when I say they, Rick Jackson, Marty Kemp, Brian Kemp, all the establishment in the Georgia political royalty, right? The Republican ruling class, they all feel in 2022, Burt Jones rode Brian Kemp's coattails into the lieutenant governor's office. So they're not going to support Burt Jones. No way. Because see, Burt Jones was in this group. That's how they see it. He was in this group. That's right. No way will they support Burt Jones. Now, Donald Trump held 2 campaign rallies in Georgia that were specifically focused on shaping the 2022 primary. All right, because he was highly focused on unseating incumbent Republicans who upheld the 2020 election results. Keep that in mind. So, in 2022, he had an event in Perry, Georgia, September 25th, 2021. And then he had a rally March 26, 2022 in Commerce, Georgia. That was trying to be a kingmaker, flex his muscle, and get rid of Brian Kemp all the way down the list. Chris Carr, get rid of Chris Carr, Brad Raffensperger. Now, going into 2024, let's go into 2024. We're going to go back into 2024, and we're going to come right around to the close. Now, don't forget, 2024, we know all the support Nikki Haley had. We have the suspect support of Brian Kemp and Marty Kemp. Suspect support. We have the support of Rick Jackson. They thought they could get rid of, hopefully, in 2024, Donald Trump. Georgia, they were eyeing Georgia. Most of the country establishment, the Never Trumpers, the Lincoln Project, whatever they were all eyeing Georgia as an opportunity to get rid of Trump. Marty Kemp, remember, said Donald Trump did not earn her support. Remember that? And she would probably write her husband's name in. Now, Marty Kemp and the girls, as the governor, we want to make sure we're not attacking anyone's family. Because Brian Kemp would refer to them, Marty and the girls, right? Marty Kemp and Brian Kemp. Marty Kemp has never shown appreciation for Donald Trump. Now, in 2024, we have all the things that took place in 2020, right? All the things that happened where President Trump put out X post or tweeted out negative things about Brian Kemp, her husband, had people run against her husband. So the interview, right? Let's see, is this it? Yes. The date, the interview was broadcast in early April 2024. This is Marty Kemp. She was being interviewed by anchor Karen Gear on Atlanta local ABC affiliate. During the interview, Gear asked First Lady about upcoming November election, while her husband Brian Kemp had already publicly stated he would vote for the Republican ticket. Now you got to remember, Brian Kemp never went out and said, I will vote for Donald Trump. They can't bring themselves to do that. He said, I will vote for the Republican ticket. Whoever the Republican ticket is. Marty made it clear she wasn't there yet, right? Marty made it clear on a public broadcast, I'm not there yet. She stated that Donald Trump still hasn't earned my vote. The write-in comment, when asked what she planned to do when she cast her ballot, she responded, we've got a long way going. I would probably write Brian Kemp's name in. He'd make a darn good president, in my opinion. She did leave the door slightly open for her stance to evolve. However, those specific comments on local television is what directly set the stage for Trump's retaliatory remarks in Atlanta. So it set Trump off that Marty Kemp would never publicly admit that she would vote, right? She would vote for Brian Kemp. Keep in mind, in early 2010, Kemp was appointed Secretary of State by Sonny Perdue. Now, this is why Trump gets very upset with the feeling of never being shown any appreciation. Sonny Perdue appoints Brian Kemp to Secretary of State in 2010, all right? And then he goes on to win a full term. Sonny Perdue then turns around. This guy's Secretary of State gets an appointment, then turns around and gets an endorsement handed to him by Donald Trump when Sonny Perdue and David go to get the endorsement. Now, 2024. March 9th, 2024, he went to Rome and held an event, right? But August 3rd, 2024, that's the one right there. August 3rd, 2024, Atlanta, major rally at the Georgia State University Center, notably held the same venue his opponent, Kamala Harris. So August 3rd, 2024, Trump holds an event. Trump launched into roughly 10-minute tirade against the sitting Republican governor, largely blaming Kemp for the 2020 loss, name-calling him and going after him. Now, I'm going to play about 5 minutes of that rally that night when Trump come, and we remember like it was yesterday what happened. So we all remember just like it was yesterday when Trump got there. See, Trump comes to Atlanta. Brian Kemp, no one meets him at the airport. Well, he has certain people meet him there, not the Kemps. Brian Kemp doesn't come to the rally. Running against Kamala Harris there doesn't come to the rally to help support him. No one shows up at the rally as far as that's concerned. And he's dealing with a first lady saying he hasn't earned the vote. So Trump's a little upset. We're going to play about 6 minutes of how the news reported it and what happened that day in August 3rd.
Stacey Abrams. He said that, and his wife said it too. I said, well, you won the nomination, so let's do some big rallies. And I did them out at an airport, massive rallies, 55,000 and 52,000. There may have even been a third, I don't know. I remember 2 monster rallies. And I said, you're going to win. He said, I don't think so, sir. I said, no, you're going to win. I'm telling you, I can tell the vibe of the people. I'm like, I think, David, 287 and 0 in the last 12 months with endorsements. People respect my endorsement, and I respect them, and I love them. I love them. But, so I did these 2 big rallies, and he won. He did win. He won by like 2%. And his wife looked at me and said, thank you, sir. We'll never, ever be able to repay you for what you did. You got my husband the nomination, and then we beat somebody who was unbeatable. You know, she was, in theory, unbeatable. She was the hottest politician in the country at the time. Democrat politician, I would say I was hotter because I was president. So I was hotter now. I'm only kidding, Marjorie. I'm only kidding. Although maybe I'm not kidding, actually. No, she was like the hottest, certainly the hottest Democrat politician in the country. And she was going wild for years. She's still going wild. She can't even believe it. But I got him by doing massive rallies. And I really worked hard. He's the most disloyal guy I think I've ever seen. But think of the wife. We can never repay you for what you've done, sir. We could have never won. And now she said 2 weeks ago that I will not endorse him because he hasn't earned my endorsement. I haven't earned her endorsement. I have nothing to do with her. Somewhere he went bad. And you know what? Your numbers in Georgia are very average. Your crime numbers, your economic numbers, all of your numbers, you're very average. You can do a lot better, and you'll do a lot better with a better governor. You can do a lot better, just so you understand. But I don't want her endorsement. I don't want his endorsement. I just want them to do their job for Georgia. And you know what? He's the governor. He ought to support his Republican Party. Because if he doesn't have his Republican Party, I could tell you where he came from, and it wasn't good. And you have a great leader of the Republican Party right here. Stand up, please. He has done an unbelievable job. And he has to work like hell with a governor that doesn't help him. And Raffensperger ought to make sure that the vote is honest. And they don't want the vote to be honest. In my opinion, they want us to lose. That's actually my opinion. And we can't let that happen. Because if we lose Georgia, we lose the whole thing and our country goes to hell. Because we can't have her be president of the United States. She's grossly incompetent.
He joins me now. Jeff, always wonderful to have you. And of course, you were very much involved and present for and witnessed what happened with Donald Trump in the state of Georgia. You also, of course, worked very closely with Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who, again, won in Georgia and has proven that Republicans can win statewide in Georgia, where Donald Trump, of course, lost. Your reaction to Donald Trump renewing his attacks on these 2 men, your former colleagues, over the weekend?
I couldn't help but think when Donald Trump was saying in his speech, if Brian Kemp would have just taken a phone call, what he really means is if Brian Kemp would have just committed a felony, everything would have been okay. That's really what Donald Trump's trying to say. The real story here is what Republican leadership has done in Georgia over the last 8 years, almost 8 years, and really seen Republican principles and policies really work. And and grow the economy and to continue to improve education. It had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But look, this is his game. He walks down the street, he finds somebody to sucker punch. So he looks big, he looks strong. And the problem is now really shifted to the Republican Party because they sit there and cheer him on from the other side of the street instead of doing something about it. It's almost like they're more addicted to the blood sport than they are the actual party.
So,
What's the pressure on?
Your governor, Kemp, and Raffensperger are doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. What are they doing? I don't know. They got something in mind, you know, they got a little something in mind. Kemp is very bad for the Republican Party. Under these kinds of woke radical left policies, Atlanta is like a killing field, and your governor ought to get off his and do something about it. He's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp. Bad guy. But think of it. I got this guy, just think, and then that's it. I got this guy nominated, I then got him elected. Without me, he doesn't get nominated and he doesn't get elected. He's a bad guy, and he's not doing this country a good service. People are looking at Georgia with Fani and her lover and all of the other things saying, what the hell is going on in Georgia? What the hell is going on? The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020, and we're not going to let them rig the presidential election in 2024.
Governor Kemp responded on social media, writing in part, "My focus is on winning this November, not engaging in petty personal insults. You should do the same, Mr. President, and leave my family out of it." We should note, between Harris's ascension to the top of the Democratic ticket and Trump reigniting this feud with Kemp, a very popular governor there are a lot of Republicans in Georgia who worry that that state is now very much back in play. Next up here...
Last night at a rally in Battleground, Georgia, former President Donald Trump reopening old wounds, attacking the state's Republican Governor Brian Kemp and his certification of the 2020 presidential election results in this state.
He's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. And all he had to do is sign something where the Senate would like to look at election integrity.
Trump also testing attack lines in...
You know, one of the takeaways for me is that the next Secretary of State will be integral in creating a new voting system for Georgia. There's been a lot of discussion about...
Last night at a rally in Battleground...
All right, folks, that was in August of 2024. And, you know, look, President Trump, disloyal, and his wife never said thank you. That's the way Trump's seen it. He was very upset that night. And at no time did they ever show their appreciation. So after that happened, all right, they ended up brokering a truce, right? They ended up brokering a truce. And in an interesting twist of political pragmatism, despite this highly publicized feud in August, Trump and Kemp eventually brokered a truce later in the fall. Kemp activated his political machine to help secure the state and Trump win, and went on to win Georgia in November. Now, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones was at the rally that night. Okay? Yes, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones was absolutely at the August 3rd, 2024 rally in Atlanta. All right? Jones went after Jeff Duncan that night, attacking Jeff Duncan. The most talked about moment of Jones' speech was his attack of former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. Duncan had recently become a vocal critic of Trump and crossed party lines endorsing Kamala Harris. Someone asked me, what I thought about that, and I said sometimes you just can't fix stupid as far as that's concerned. Now, then that went on the next day or two with everyone coming out and attacking President Trump. Everyone in the political circle here in Georgia, allies turned enemies to something Governor Brian Kemp and Donald Trump have a long and complicated history that has helped shape Georgia politics and will play a major factor in each of these political futures. Governor Kemp, the next day, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp snaps back at Trump after repeated attacks. Leave my family out of it. And here's the quote you heard earlier from Brian Kemp. This was right after the August rally there. My focus is on winning in November and saving our country from Kamala Harris and the Democrats, not engaging in petty personal insults, attacking fellow Republicans, or dwelling on the past. You should do the same, Mr. President, and leave my family out of it. Patricia Murphy at the AJC. Brian Kemp is the most popular Republican in Georgia, even more popular than Trump himself. It's like he's trying to lose, talking about Trump, right? As a Georgia residents were posting, as a Georgia resident, he's going to lose this state again. There's a reason Brian Kemp won by large margin, but we voted for Biden and elected 2 Democrat senators. There's a lot of Republicans here. A lot of them really don't like Trumpism. These are the kind of comments that were coming out after that August rally where Trump went after Brian Kemp, Marty Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, Chris Carr. Here is Chris Carr. Joan and I stand with Brian Kemp and Marty Kemp. Georgia opened first during COVID. Record economic growth, leading the nation in the fight against criminal street gangs and human trafficking, right? So there is Chris Carr going after Donald Trump. John Burns, Speaker of the House. The Georgia House has been proud to work alongside Governor Kemp, and I've been proud to call him my friend. We'll continue to work together to make Georgia the best place to work, live, work, and raise a family. That's the Speaker of the House of Georgia, John Burns, right? Here is the Corey Tower. As you all know it, this is John Burns here. Here's the Corey Tower. Corey Tower, a defunct 300-foot tall steam plant smokestack standing over downtown Atlanta, enters the chat. It's owned by Bill Corey, a Kemp ally who leased part of the property to his campaign a few years ago. And the tower says, Kemp, #1, Georgia, America. Here is Andy Stanley, Pastor Andy Stanley. So grateful for Brian Kemp and Marty Kemp. Now, Eric Erickson, I always call him the blowfish of Georgia, Eric Erickson. The real problem with Trump mouthing off about Republicans is that there are still enough of them who will vote for him but don't like him. Now, don't forget, these are very important. The reason I'm reading, they don't like Trump, okay? Who will start to rationalize in their head that they can survive 2 years of Harris and take back the House and Senate in 2026. Keep bullying, demanding unity and loyalty while showing none in return, and you have a recipe for disaster. See, Eric Erickson's letting you know at this time, right, that we can sit back and wait. We can get a Democrat. We can just wait for 2 years. The Trump rally in Atlanta, another Eric Erickson quote, a Trump rally in Atlanta makes it more likely Kamala Harris wins. Trump is his own worst enemy, he wrote. Donald Trump is really trying to build unity in Georgia by attacking the sitting Republican governor, whose ground game he will need to win, and also the governor's wife. Well, he just can't help himself. And if he loses, it'll be because of this stuff, not a stolen election. Eric Erickson going on to say, Trump either lost or had stolen the state of Georgia. It wasn't stolen by less than 12,000 votes. He needs a ground game to maximize turnout in the state and doesn't have it. The one guy who does is Brian Kemp, and Trump just attacked him and his wife. Well played. Now we are going to see Kemp's machine and turnout with Derek Dooley here in the next couple days. Here's the one they always attack, right? Eric Erickson again, right after the rally in August of 2024. I suspect before Trump got off the stage tonight, his team allowed him to socialize with some Georgia Stop the Steal freaks who whisper in his ear. The Democrats keep their social media freaks away from Biden and Harris's ear. The GOP put them right at Trump's table, right? Interesting. Here's Greg Bluestein. For anyone questioning who holds the real political power in the state, ask Perdue and Abrams how that worked out. The governor paved the path for success in Georgia. All Donald Trump has to do is follow it, says Stephen Lawson, a Kemp supporter and ally. Now here's Gabriel Sterling, right? Georgia elects. Here is Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State, his response to the rally. These are all responses to the rally. Georgia's elections are secure. The winner here in November will reflect the will of the people. History has taught us this type of message doesn't sell well here in Georgia, sir. That's when he was attacking Brad Raffensperger. Gabriel Sterling, running for Secretary of State, said, my boss sums it up pretty clear. Here's just someone in Georgia with their picture. I stand with Brian Kemp and First Lady. Brendan Buck, do you know who Brendan Buck is? Worked for Mike Pence. Attacking the popular GOP governor of a critical swing state. Trump seems to be in signature self-destruct mode. Now, here's where I wanted to get to, right? Right after the rally, Representative Scott Hilton, remember Scott Hilton campaigning with Rick Jackson today. Scott Hilton, co-chair of the Nikki Haley leadership team for the 2024 election here in Georgia. Scott Hilton that used to work for Brian Kemp directly and has been a supporter of Brian Kemp's for a long time. I stand with Governor Kemp. He is a winner and one of the most popular and effective governors in our nation. Under his leadership, we have cut taxes, raised teachers' pay, and kept our community safe. We need more true public servants like Brian Kemp and the Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp. Now, Burt Jones did not do that. He wasn't involved in that. He's never turned his back. But the AJC, Burt Jones said, this was Burt Jones' comment after that rally, I am friends with both the president and the governor, and as much as I would like for my friends to be friends, sometimes that's not the case. And that's okay. The bottom line, the country can't take 4 more years of the mess Joe Biden and Kamala Harris created. We have one shot to fix it this November, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Donald Trump is in the White House, not Kamala Harris. That was the statement that Burt Jones made that day, okay? So, don't forget, Brian Kemp there was a time in Georgia. See, this is July 19th, 2018. This is when it all started, right? Remember, Brian Kemp's running against Casey Cagle for the lieutenant governor, for governor in the Republican primary. Remember, the Republican ruling class, the Georgia Republican royalty, the incestuous Republican circle. Remember, they went to President Trump at that time. He didn't even know Brian Kemp. He didn't know Brian Kemp. They went to President Trump at that time and said, do us a favor, endorse Brian Kemp over Casey Cagle in the primary. This was unheard of. You don't get in the primary. President of the United States does not get into a governor's race, an open primary, and endorse. But Donald Trump stepped out to do a favor in Georgia, and this is the day it bit him in the back. Right here. Remember this date, July 19, 2018. This is when Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, said, proud to have real Donald Trump's full and total endorsement in the Republican primary runoff on July 24th. Stand with us as we fight to put hardworking Georgians first. That was the statement Brian Kemp made on July 19, 2018. He was in a runoff against Casey Cagle. There was several candidates in the primary. The runoff was between Brian Kemp and Casey Cagle. The Perdue's went and asked President Trump, do us a favor. Help our friend get over the finish line. And when President Trump helped Brian Kemp get over the finish line and get the nomination and an unusual endorsement in a Republican primary, he then went on just 3 days. Now, trust me, if the polling was not so tight against Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams, they could have kept Donald Trump out of the general election in November of 2018. But the polling was so tight, I think it's November 3rd, we can look that up. Just days before the election, Trump flies into Macon, Georgia. Approximately 55,000 people there, having Brian Kemp, Marty Kemp, the family, and all of them on the stage, and holds a big rally and tells Georgia, get out and make this man your next governor. You see, Donald Trump has never felt at any time that they've shown him any appreciation, consideration, or real thank you. So let me just say to you, when Rick Jackson, this phony fraud of a candidate, gets out there and wants to lead you to believe he wants to be the next governor of Georgia, I will get you a boatload of your money back. My biggest concern is who is the boatload of the money that he is going to be returning to who? Right? Rick Jackson wants to make sure that in June, when the runoff is over, and there'll be a runoff, that you never again in Georgia have to use Trump's likeness on a campaign mailer. You never again in Georgia have to say, I'm endorsed by Donald Trump. You never again in Georgia have to worry about a Senate candidate being endorsed or supported by Donald Trump. And last but not least, you don't have to worry if Donald Trump will ever get his hands on the governor's office in Georgia, because don't forget, if Burt Jones is the next governor of Georgia, not so fast. Donald Trump will not immediately be gone. So watch all these candidates, my friends, all these candidates, every last one of them. After all of the runoffs are over, as they head into November, start the distancing from Donald J. Trump. Just Rick Jackson wants to put the final death nail in this guy and Georgia. You see, Donald Trump collapsed every single political move Rick Jackson has made. The last thing Rick Jackson is a Trump supporter. Period. So, let me know what you think, how you feel. Don't be a part of the political ruling class. Don't be a part of the what they're doing. Don't be a part of this. So, let's see. What do we have here? I think, is it almost time to take a break? I mean, might be almost time to take a break. So, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back real soon. I'm your host, BKP. You've been watching BKP Politics on voiceofruralamerica.com.
With my 35 years of experience, our team at U.S. Asset Management can deliver professional investment management, financial planning to help you target your goals, and even specialized divorce financial analysis if you need it. We are here to help you make better decisions with your money. Call U.S. Asset Management today, and let's get to work in your financial future.
The left is siding with illegals, attacking ICE, and fighting to let non-citizens vote. Republican Kelvin King is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, Air Force veteran, and conservative businessman. As Georgia's Secretary of State, Kelvin will put Americans first, root out corruption, clean up voter rolls, and restore confidence in our elections. The other candidates had their chance and failed. Republican Kelvin King for Secretary of State, leadership Georgia voters can trust.
Pro-Trump warrior Steve Gooch won't just cut property taxes in Georgia. He'll throw them straight in the wood chipper.
Senior citizens on fixed income shouldn't be forced from their homes. Neither should veterans who have served our country and fought for our freedoms. And neither should anyone else for that matter. Frankly, these crazy property taxes are un-American. I'll tear them to shreds. We'll make home ownership great again.
Steve Gooch for Lieutenant Governor. Toughest tax cutter Georgia's ever seen.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with U.S. Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call U.S. Asset Management today and put us to work for you.